Be me, a man of simple tastes, longtime resident of a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. My property, my sanctuary. Bought this house 20 years ago, settled in, raised a family. My biggest luxury is a meticulously maintained 30-year-old privacy hedge that runs the length of my backyard. It was planted by my late father and me, a living monument to quiet evenings and shared laughter. It's mature, beautiful, and the reason my yard feels like my own. I know the HOA bylaws better than most, having served on the board for a stint years ago. My life is predictable, peaceful, and precisely how I like it. Be not me, Karen. She moved in 6 months ago, immediately bought the largest, gaudiest house on the street. She's loud, she's entitled, and she has a penchant for pronouncing HOA as if it were an ancient title of nobility. Within weeks, she somehow maneuvered herself into the position of HOA President. Her first official act, after unilaterally redecorating the common area landscaping, was to declare my beloved privacy hedge non-conforming. She cited some obscure clause about aesthetic uniformity and demanded its immediate removal. Never mind that it predates the clause, was approved by the Architectural Review Board in the 90s, and has been a fixture for generations. She saw it, she didn't like it, and therefore it had to go. A clear, massive injustice, a direct assault on my property and my peace. The first official notice arrived, a stern letter from the HOA, signed by Karen, stating my hedge violated community guidelines and I had 30 days to remove it or face escalating fines. I responded with a concise, polite letter of my own. I included copies of the original Architectural Review Board approval, photos of the hedge dating back decades, and a direct citation of the grandfather clause in the bylaws that explicitly protected existing landscaping features. I even referenced a past board resolution from 2005 that specifically upheld the grandfathering of mature hedges. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not. Karen sent back an even more aggressive notice, dismissing my documentation as outdated and irrelevant to the community's future vision. She threatened a $1,000 fine if I failed to comply within 2 weeks, adding an extra charge for administrative oversight. Her behavior escalated quickly from there. Every week brought a new complaint, always directed at me, always trivial. My grass, which I cut weekly, was suddenly excessively long by half an inch. My mailbox, a standard black model, was declared faded and in need of immediate repainting, despite being less than a year old. I meticulously documented every interaction, every notice, every reply. I took dated photos, kept precise logs of lawn maintenance and mailbox inspections. Each time, I responded with documented proof of compliance, citing the exact rule or guideline that showed her claims were baseless. Each time, she dropped the fine but doubled down with a new, equally absurd accusation. It was a war of attrition, designed to wear me down, to make me give in to her demands just for the sake of peace. But I am a stubborn man, and this was my home. One afternoon, I caught her in my front yard, openly photographing my porch light, muttering about non-standard illumination fixtures. I stepped outside. "Can I help you, Karen?" I asked, my voice flat. She jumped, startled, then quickly composed herself, a smug smile returning. "Just performing my duties, Mr. Henderson, ensuring everyone contributes to the aesthetic integrity of our lovely community. That light fixture," she gestured vaguely, "it really clashes with the overall colonial revival theme we're aiming for." I simply stared at her. "There is no colonial revival theme in the bylaws, Karen, and my porch light is an approved model." She flushed, her eyes narrowing. "Well, perhaps we should update the bylaws then, for the future. Some people are just resistant to progress, aren't they?" She spun on her heel and marched away, leaving me to ponder her increasingly audacious behavior. She truly believed she was above reproach, above the rules she supposedly enforced. The breaking point arrived with a flourish of administrative incompetence. A new HOA newsletter landed in my mailbox. On the front page, under a banner proclaiming Community Enhancement Initiative, was a detailed plan. It described the removal of obstructive, overgrown shrubbery on my property, my hedge, and the reclamation of a small, irregular strip of land adjacent to my backyard. This strip, a cherished, slightly overgrown garden patch where my kids used to play, had always been considered part of my property. It was unfenced but had my landscaping, my plants, and the clear understanding of every previous neighbor and board member that it was mine. Karen, however, had decided it was undeveloped common area and announced her intention to install a large "Welcome to our community" sign there, complete with decorative rocks and new plantings. The newsletter included a specific date and time for the demolition crew to begin work. It stated that if I interfered, I would be billed for the entire operation and face additional legal action. This wasn't just about a hedge anymore. This was a direct, brazen attempt to seize my property and dictate my entire living environment. The sheer audacity of her plan ignited something cold and calculating inside me. I stopped reacting to her petty provocations. I began to plan. My revenge began, not with a bang, but with a spreadsheet and a deep dive into dusty archives. I spent weeks in the county recorder's office, cross-referencing my deed with every plat map, survey, and easement recorded for my property and the surrounding lots. My suspicion about the common area was confirmed. A plat map from 1982, digitally rescanned but never properly integrated into the HOA's digital records, clearly showed the contested strip of land was part of my deeded property. The original physical survey markers were still there, barely visible under years of leaf litter, but undeniable. The HOA had simply been operating on an outdated assumption. Next, I turned my attention to the HOA's bylaws and articles of incorporation. I remembered a contentious amendment from about 15 years ago, pushed through by a developer, that seemed to have vanished from the current digital handbook. I dug through physical archives, old board meeting minutes, and legal filings. I found it. The amendment, which granted the HOA significantly expanded powers regarding aesthetic uniformity and allowed unilateral changes to common areas, had been improperly filed with the state. A critical procedural step was missed, rendering the amendment legally null and void. This meant many of the rules Karen was attempting to enforce, including the specific clause she cited for my hedge, were technically unenforceable. While researching these legal deficiencies, I started looking into the HOA's finances. Karen's rapid ascent to power and her aggressive enforcement tactics had raised my eyebrows. It didn't take long to find irregularities. She had been using HOA funds to pay for legal consultations related to our disputes, not general HOA business, and without proper board approval. I found invoices for community design consultations that far exceeded reasonable rates, paid to a company whose address mysteriously matched her brother-in-law's business. Her spending for the community welcome sign project was similarly inflated, and all these expenses skirted standard procurement procedures. I gathered bank statements, vendor invoices, and meeting minutes where these payments were conspicuously absent from official approvals. This was more than just bad management. It was a clear violation of financial transparency clauses and potentially embezzlement. My ace in the hole was a specific clause in the original, valid HOA bylaws. Article 5, Section 3, Subparagraph B. It stipulated that any board member found to be willfully misrepresenting the HOA's legal standing, misusing funds, or causing significant financial damage to the association could be immediately removed by a majority board vote and held personally liable for damages. I printed every relevant document, highlighted every clause, and created an irrefutable timeline of Karen's transgressions. Then, I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but one specializing in property law and, crucially, HOA disputes. He confirmed my findings. We worked discreetly, preparing the necessary injunctions, summons, and legal motions. The stage was set. Demolition day dawned, clear and bright, a deceptive calm before the storm. I was out in my yard, watering my flowers, dressed in a simple t-shirt when the crew trucks pulled up. Karen arrived moments later in a shiny SUV, looking triumphant. She marched over, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. The crew foreman, a burly man with a clipboard, started heading towards my hedge. "Morning, Karen," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. She barely spared me a glance. "Finally ready to cooperate, are we, Mr. Henderson? Took you long enough to see reason. My crew is here to make your property conform, and then they'll start on the common area. It's for the good of the community, you see, progress." "Oh, I see it perfectly," I replied, holding up a thick envelope. "This is for your crew foreman, a court injunction. Any attempt to touch my hedge, or indeed any part of my property, will result in immediate arrest and charges of trespass and property damage." Karen's face went from smug to a startled pallor. "What? That's impossible. I'm the president. I authorized this," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Funny you mentioned that," I said as my lawyer, Mr. Davies, stepped out from behind my house. He held a briefcase and wore a perfectly tailored suit. "Because we also have a temporary restraining order against you, personally, Miss Peterson, from approaching Mr. Henderson's property, and a summons for an emergency HOA board meeting, and a cease and desist order for your demolition crew, specifically regarding this entire block." Karen stared, her jaw slack. "This is ridiculous. You can't do this. I have the power here." "You had the power, Karen, until you broke the law," I said, my voice hardening. I unrolled the large, crisp copy of the 1982 plat map. "You see this, Mr. Foreman? This plat map from 1982 clearly shows this common area Miss Peterson is so fond of is, in fact, part of my deeded property. The original survey markers are right there, under those ferns. Your crew was about to illegally trespass and demolish a structure on private land." The foreman, who had been reading the injunction handed to him by Mr. Davies, looked up, his face grim. He glanced at Karen, then back at the documents. "Sorry, ma'am," he said to Karen, "we can't proceed, not with a court order. We'd be liable." He started signaling his crew to pack up. Karen's eyes darted frantically between me, Mr. Davies, and the departing crew. Her arrogance was visibly shattering. "This is a setup. You're trying to intimidate me." "And these, Karen," Mr. Davies interjected smoothly, producing a stack of documents. "These are the improperly filed amendments to the HOA's Articles of Incorporation. They render your authority, and many of the rules you've been attempting to enforce, null and void. Also, these are the invoices and bank statements proving you've been using HOA funds for personal legal counsel and inflated contractor costs, all without proper board approval. That's embezzlement, Karen, and a direct violation of Article 5, Section 3, subparagraph B of the original valid bylaws." Her jaw dropped. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her face, previously red with anger, turned an ashen white. The terror in her eyes was palpable. "You've not only caused significant legal exposure for the HOA with your fraudulent actions," I concluded, "but you've also been systematically misusing their funds. The board is meeting in less than an hour, with a full agenda to vote on your immediate removal, and to begin proceedings to hold you personally liable for all damages. The State Attorney General's office is also very interested in those improperly filed documents and the embezzlement charges. You're not just losing your presidency, Karen. You're facing a mountain of legal trouble." The immediate aftermath was swift and decisive. Karen, a trembling mess, was escorted off the property by security guards that the board, already fed up with her antics, had quickly hired. The emergency board meeting proceeded without her, with Mr. Davies presenting the irrefutable evidence of her misconduct. The board unanimously voted to remove her from her position as president and from the HOA entirely. They immediately initiated legal action to recover all misappropriated funds, with the initial estimates already well into 6 figures. The state began its own investigation into her fraudulent filings and the potential embezzlement. The demolition crew left, having touched nothing. My hedge stood undisturbed, a monument to my patience. My property, my peace, were secure once more. The neighborhood buzzed with the news, a collective sigh of relief palpable in the air. Karen faced multiple charges, both civil and potentially criminal. Her reputation, her finances, and possibly her freedom were all on the line. I simply went back to watering my flowers, a quiet satisfaction settling in my chest. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Folks, what a wild ride. Karen is officially out. The new interim president, a nice lady named Sarah who has been a silent ally throughout this whole ordeal, told me they found even more financial irregularities during their internal audit. Apparently, Karen tried to use HOA funds to buy a community sculpture for like 5 times its actual value from a company owned by her brother-in-law. The civil suit to recover funds is moving forward, and the initial estimates are pushing 6 figures. She's lawyering up hard, but everyone else on the board is united against her. My hedge got a fresh trim today, looking better than ever. The welcome sign they planned for my common area is now going up in the actual community park. Progress. The neighborhood feels lighter. Update 2, 1 month later. Big news on the legal front. The state attorney general's office got involved directly. It turns out the improperly filed HOA amendments weren't just a simple clerical error. They involved some deliberate misstatements of fact years ago, specifically designed to try and push through certain developer-friendly changes that benefited a few key individuals. Karen was attempting to leverage these very same invalid amendments for her own power grab. They're now looking at her for direct fraud in connection with her attempts to enforce these invalid rules, and definitely for the embezzlement. Her personal assets are being frozen to cover potential restitution to the HOA. She tried to claim she was unaware of the proper procedures, but the paper trail is too clear, and my lawyer made sure it was all laid out for the AG's office. Her legal team is trying to negotiate a plea, but it's not looking good. Feels good to water my hedge without looking over my shoulder. Update 3, 3 months later. Final update. Karen didn't get off lightly. She eventually settled with the HOA for a substantial amount, effectively draining her savings and forcing her to sell off some investment properties to cover the restitution. The state prosecution resulted in a conviction for misuse of funds and fraudulent filings. No jail time, which I suppose is a win for her, but a very hefty fine, probation, and permanent disbarment from ever serving on any nonprofit board or homeowners association ever again. Her community sculpture scam was fully exposed, and her brother-in-law is also now under investigation. My peaceful life is completely restored. My hedge stands tall, a testament to patience and knowing the rule book better than the tyrants who seek to abuse it. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you really need to fear. Thanks for following the ride.